The rain had been falling for 3 hours straight, and Maya's shoes were completely soaked. She stood under the small awning of a fancy restaurant, watching well-dressed people walk past her like she was invisible. Her stomach made a loud growling sound that embarrassed her, even though nobody was close enough to hear it. It had been 3 days since her last real meal. 3 days of surviving on whatever she could find in trash cans behind bakeries and coffee shops. 3 days of sleeping in doorways and under bridges, always moving before security guards or police could find her. Maya pressed her face against the restaurant window and watched the people inside. They were laughing, talking, and eating food that looked amazing. A man in an expensive suit was cutting into a thick steak, while a woman across from him sipped wine from a crystal glass. Their plates were full of food that probably cost more than Maya had seen in months. But what caught her attention wasn't the food. It was the piano. In the corner of the restaurant sat a beautiful black piano. A man in a bow tie was playing soft music while people ate their dinner. Maya watched his fingers move across the keys, and her heart started beating faster. She knew she could play better than him. Much better. The memory hit her like a wave. She was 7 years old, sitting next to her father on a piano bench. His hands were guiding hers as they played together. "Feel the music, Maya," he would say. "Don't just play the notes. Tell a story with them." Those were some of the only clear memories she had of him. Everything else was blurry, like looking through foggy glass. The social workers had told her that trauma could do that to a child's memory. When her father died in that car accident, something inside her had shut down to protect itself. Maya shook her head, trying to push the memory away. She couldn't afford to think about the past right now. She needed to focus on surviving today. She looked down at her clothes. Her jeans had holes in the knees, and her jacket was dirty from sleeping outside. Her hair was tangled because she hadn't been able to shower in a week. She knew how she looked to other people. She knew what they thought when they saw her, but she also knew something they didn't. She could play piano like nobody they had ever heard before. The idea came to her slowly. What if she asked them to let her play? What if she offered to play the piano in exchange for a meal? It sounded crazy, but what did she have to lose? Maya took a deep breath and pushed open the restaurant door. Immediately, she felt out of place. The ceiling was high with fancy lights hanging down. The tables were covered with white cloth and the silverware sparkled under the warm lighting. The smell of expensive food filled the air, making her stomach growl even louder. A man in a black suit approached her quickly. He had perfectly styled hair and a name tag that read, "Vincent Torres, manager." His eyes looked her up and down, and his nose wrinkled slightly like he smelled something bad. "Excuse me, miss," Vincent said in a voice that was trying to sound polite but clearly wasn't. "I think you might be lost. This is a private establishment." Maya's cheeks burned with embarrassment, but she forced herself to stand up straight. "I'm not lost," she said. "I have a question to ask you." Vincent looked around the restaurant nervously. Several customers were already staring at them. A woman in pearls was whispering to her husband while pointing in Maya's direction. "Look," Vincent said, lowering his voice. "I don't want to call security, but you can't be in here. You're making our guests uncomfortable." "I can play piano," Maya said quickly, before he could say anything else. "I can play better than the man you have over there. Let me play for 30 minutes, and all I want is a meal. Just one meal." Vincent stared at her like she had just said something in a foreign language. Then he started to laugh. It wasn't a mean laugh exactly, but it wasn't kind either. It was the laugh of someone who thought they had just heard the most ridiculous thing in the world. "You want to play piano?" he said, still chuckling. "In exchange for food?" "Yes," Maya said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm really good. I promise I won't embarrass you." A waiter who had been listening walked over. He was a young man with a round face who looked like he thought the whole situation was hilarious. "Come on, Vincent," the waiter said. "Let her play. What's the worst? That could happen. Maybe she'll give us all a good laugh." Other staff members started gathering around. Maya could feel their eyes on her, and she knew they were all thinking the same thing. They were looking at a dirty homeless girl who thought she could play piano in their fancy restaurant. Vincent looked around at his staff, then at the customers who were watching the scene unfold. Maya could see him thinking. She could tell he was trying to decide if letting her play would be more trouble than just kicking her out. "You know what?" Vincent said finally. "This might actually be entertaining, but here are my rules. You get to play one song, just one. If you're terrible, which I'm sure you will be, you leave immediately. No food, no second chances." "And if I'm good?" Maya asked. Vincent's smile was not kind. "Honey, let me save you some time. You won't be good. Look at yourself. Look at where you are in life. People who can really play piano don't end up begging on the street." His words hit Maya like a slap across the face. She felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she blinked them away. She had heard worse things than this in the past year. She had been called names, treated like garbage, and made to feel like she was worth nothing. But they didn't know what she could do. They had no idea what lived inside her fingers. "One song," Maya said. "That's all I need." Vincent waved his hand toward the piano like he was doing her a huge favor. "Go ahead then. Give us your best shot." Maya walked across the restaurant toward the piano. Every step felt like it took forever. She could hear people whispering as she passed their tables. Some of them were laughing quietly. Others looked annoyed that their dinner was being interrupted by what they probably thought was some kind of street performer. The man who had been playing piano looked confused as Maya approached. Vincent walked over and whispered something in his ear. The pianist nodded and stepped away from the bench, but not before giving Maya a look that said he felt sorry for her. Maya sat down on the piano bench and looked at the keys. They were perfect, clean, and beautiful. She hadn't touched a real piano in over a year. The foster home she had lived in didn't have pianos. The shelters didn't have pianos. The streets definitely didn't have pianos. She placed her fingers on the keys and felt something inside her wake up. It was like coming home after being lost for a very long time. The restaurant was getting quieter. People were waiting to see what would happen. Maya could feel their eyes on her back. She could practically hear them thinking about how this was going to be a disaster. Maya closed her eyes and let her mind go to that place where music lived. She thought about her father and the way he used to smile when she played. She thought about all the pain she had been carrying around for the past year. She thought about being hungry and cold and alone, and then she started to play. The first notes of Chopin's Ballad No. 1 filled the air, and something magical happened. The whispers stopped. The clinking of silverware stopped. Even the kitchen noise seemed to get quieter. Maya's fingers moved across the keys like they had been waiting their whole life for this moment. The music poured out of her with an intensity that surprised even her. Every emotion she had been holding inside came flowing out through her fingertips. This wasn't just playing piano. This was telling a story. It was painting a picture with sound. It was taking every person in that restaurant on a journey they never expected to take. The melody was sad and beautiful and hopeful all at the same time. It spoke of loss and longing, but also of strength and survival. Maya played like her life depended on it, because in many ways it did. Behind her, she could hear that the restaurant had gone completely silent. Nobody was eating. Nobody was talking. She couldn't even hear people breathing. Maya played the difficult passages with perfect technique, her fingers flying across the keys with impossible speed and precision. But it wasn't just the technical skill that was impressive. It was the emotion. It was the way she made every note mean something. As she approached the end of the piece, Maya opened her eyes and looked out at the restaurant. Every single person was staring at her with their mouth open. Some people had tears in their eyes. Others looked like they had just seen a ghost. Vincent Torres was standing near the kitchen door with his arms crossed, but his expression had completely changed. The smug smile was gone. The dismissive attitude was gone. He looked shocked and confused, like he couldn't understand what had just happened. Maya played the final notes and lifted her hands from the keys. The silence that followed was so complete that she could hear the rain still falling outside. Then one person started clapping, then another. Then the entire restaurant erupted in applause that was so loud and enthusiastic that Maya almost fell off the piano bench. People were standing up. They were cheering. A woman in an elegant dress was wiping tears from her eyes while she applauded. The man with the expensive suit was shaking his head in amazement. Maya turned around on the piano bench and looked at all these people who had been treating her like garbage just 5 minutes earlier. Now they were looking at her like she was some kind of miracle. Maya's hands were still shaking as she sat at the piano bench, trying to process what had just happened. The applause was finally dying down, but people were still staring at her like they couldn't believe what they had witnessed. A waiter appeared, beside her with a glass of water. It was the same young man who had been laughing at her just minutes before, but now his face looked completely different. His eyes were wide with amazement, and his hands were trembling slightly as he set the glass down. "Miss," he said quietly, "that was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard in my life." Maya took a sip of water and realized how thirsty she was. She had been so focused on getting food that she had forgotten she hadn't had anything to drink, in hours either. Vincent Torres was still standing nearby, looking like he was trying to solve a difficult puzzle. He kept shaking his head and muttering things under his breath that Maya couldn't quite hear. "I don't understand," he said finally, loud enough for her to hear. "Where did you learn to play like that?" That was professional level. That was beyond professional level. Before Maya could answer, a man in an expensive gray suit approached the piano. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Maya noticed he was carrying a small notebook and a pen. "Excuse me," the man said politely. "I hope you don't mind the interruption. My name is Jonathan Walsh. I'm a music critic for the Classical Music Review magazine." Maya's eyes went wide. She didn't know much about the classical music world, but even she had heard of the Classical Music Review. It was one of the most important magazines in the business. "I've been reviewing classical performances for over 20 years, Jonathan continued, "and I have to tell you, what you just played was absolutely extraordinary. I've heard that piece performed by some of the world's most famous pianists, and none of them moved me the way you just did." Maya felt her cheeks getting red. She wasn't used to compliments, especially not from strangers, and definitely not from someone as important as a music critic. "Thank you," she said quietly. I really needed something to eat." Jonathan's expression became more serious. "May I ask where you studied? Who was your teacher?" "I need to know because what I just heard doesn't happen by accident. That level of technical skill combined with that depth of emotional expression, it takes years of training with a master teacher." Maya looked down at her hands. This was the part she always dreaded. The part where she had to admit that she didn't remember most of her childhood. The part where she had to explain that she was just a foster kid who had aged out of the system with nowhere to go. "My father taught me," she said slowly. "But he died when I was 8. I don't really remember much about those lessons. When I sit at a piano, it all comes back somehow." Jonathan was writing furiously in his notebook. "What was your father's name? Was he a professional musician?" Maya felt that familiar frustration rising in her chest. "I don't remember his name," she said. "I know that sounds crazy, but after he died I went into foster care, and I guess I blocked out a lot of memories. The social worker said it was normal for kids who go through trauma." Jonathan stopped writing and looked at her with a mixture of sympathy and fascination. "You're telling me that you can play Chopin's Ballet No. 1 with that level of perfection, and you don't remember who taught you?" "I remember bits and pieces," Maya said. "I remember sitting next to him at a piano. I remember his hands guiding mine. I remember him telling me to feel the music, not just play the notes. But his face is blurry in my mind, and I can't remember his name or what happened to him exactly." Vincent Torres had been listening to this conversation, and now he pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Dr. Patricia Williams," he said. "She's a psychiatrist who specializes in trauma and memory. She might be able to help you remember." Maya felt panic rising in her throat. "No," she said quickly. "I don't need a psychiatrist. I just need some food, and then I'll leave. I don't want to cause any more trouble." Jonathan put his hand up gently. "Nobody's trying to cause you trouble, but you need to understand something. What you just did, People study for decades to be able to play like that. Some people never achieve that level of skill no matter how hard they work. You're not just good, you're extraordinary. While they were talking, Maya noticed that other people in the restaurant were pulling out their phones. Some of them were taking pictures of her. Others looked like they were making phone calls or sending text messages. A woman in a red dress approached the piano. She was probably in her 40s with perfectly styled blonde hair and jewelry that probably cost more than most people made in a year. "I'm Linda Peterson," the woman said. "My husband and I own 3 art galleries in the city. We host classical music events all the time, and we know talent when we see it. Would you be interested in performing at one of our galleries?" Maya stared at her. "Performing? Like on purpose?" Linda laughed, but it was a kind laugh. "Yes, on purpose. We have events where people come specifically to listen to music. You could probably charge $500 for a 1-hour performance." $500. Maya tried to imagine having that much money at one time. She could eat for months. She could get new clothes. She could maybe even rent a room somewhere and get off the streets. But the idea of performing in front of people, on purpose, terrified her. Tonight had been different. Tonight she had been desperate and hadn't had time to think about being nervous. "I don't know," Maya said. "I've never performed for people before. I mean, not officially." Jonathan was still taking notes. "Would you mind if I recorded you playing something else?" he asked. "I'd like to send it to some colleagues of mine. They need to hear this." Maya looked around the restaurant. Most of the other customers had finished eating, but nobody was leaving. They were all still watching her, waiting to see what would happen next. "I guess that would be okay," she said. Jonathan pulled out his phone and set it on top of the piano. "Play whatever you want," he said. "Something that feels natural to you." Maya thought for a moment, then placed her hands on the keys again. This time she chose Debussy's Clair de Lune. It was a piece that had always made her feel peaceful, even during the worst times in foster care. As she began to play, the restaurant fell silent again. But this time, Maya was more aware of the audience. She could feel their attention on her like a warm blanket. Instead of making her nervous, it somehow made her play even better. The Debussy piece was completely different from the Chopin, but Maya played it with the same incredible skill and emotion. Where the Chopin had been dramatic and intense, this was gentle and dreamlike. Her fingers moved across the keys like they were floating on water. When she finished, the applause was even louder than before. Several people were crying openly now. Maya saw a man in a business suit wiping his eyes with his napkin. Jonathan stopped the recording and immediately started typing on his phone. "I'm sending this to Dr. Elena Petrov at Juilliard," he said. "She's one of the most respected piano teachers in the world. And I'm sending it to Michael Rodriguez at the New York Philharmonic. They need to hear this tonight." Maya didn't know who those people were, but from the way Jonathan said their names, she could tell they were important. Vincent Torres appeared beside the piano with a plate of food. It was the most beautiful meal Maya had ever seen. There was grilled salmon with some kind of sauce, vegetables that looked like they had been arranged by an artist, and bread that was still warm from the oven. "This is our signature dish," Vincent said. "It usually costs $65. Consider it a gift, with my apologies for how I treated you when you first came in." Maya stared at the plate. The smell was making her mouth water so much she was afraid she might drool. But she also felt overwhelmed by everything that was happening. "I don't understand any of this," she said. "An hour ago you were trying to kick me out. Now you're giving me expensive food and these people are talking about galleries and recording studios. I just played 2 songs. Jonathan sat down in a chair next to the piano. "You didn't just play 2 songs," he said gently. "You performed 2 masterpieces with a level of skill and artistry that most professional musicians never achieve. I've been in this business for 20 years, and I can count on one hand the number of times I've heard playing like yours." Maya picked up the fork and took a bite of the salmon. It was the best thing she had ever tasted in her life. She had to force herself to eat slowly instead of just shoving the whole plate in her mouth. While she ate, Jonathan's phone started ringing. He answered it and walked a few feet away, but Maya could hear him talking excitedly to whoever was on the other end. Yes, I know it sounds impossible, she heard him say. But I'm telling you, I've never heard anything like it. She's sitting right here. No, she's not a student anywhere. She doesn't even remember her training. More people were approaching the piano now. Maya counted at least 6 different conversations happening around her, all about her playing. People were making phone calls, sending videos, and taking pictures. Linda Peterson sat down across from Maya. I want you to know that I'm serious about the gallery performance, she said. If you're interested, Maya was sitting in the restaurant's back office, wrapped in a warm jacket that Linda Peterson had given her. It was almost midnight, but the restaurant was still full of people who didn't want to leave. Word had somehow spread beyond the restaurant, and classical music lovers from all over the city were showing up just to see the mysterious girl who could play piano like an angel. Vincent Torres had closed the restaurant to new customers, but he let the people who were already there stay, as long as they wanted. Several of them had asked Maya to play again, and each time she did, more people gathered outside the windows trying to listen. Jonathan Walsh was sitting across from her, his notebook now completely full of notes. His phone hadn't stopped ringing for the past 2 hours. Every time he answered, it was another important person in the classical music world who had heard about Maya and wanted to know more. I need to ask you some specific questions, Jonathan said gently. I know this is overwhelming, but the people I've been talking to tonight, they have some theories about who you might be. Maya pulled the jacket tighter around herself. What kind of theories? Well, first, can you tell me anything else about your father? Even small details might help. What did he look like? Do you remember anything about where you lived? What about your mother? Maya closed her eyes and tried to think. The memories were like looking at old photographs that had been damaged by water. She could make out shapes and colors, but the details were blurry. I remember my father had dark hair, she said slowly, and kind eyes. I think we lived in a house with a big piano in the living room. A grand piano, not an upright like most people have. She paused, struggling to remember more. My mother. I think she died when I was very young. I don't have any clear memories of her at all. It was just me and my father until the accident. Jonathan was writing everything down. Do you remember anything about the accident? Maya shook her head. Just that he was driving somewhere and didn't come home. The social workers told me he died in a car crash, but I don't remember being told about it. I just remember being in a foster home and not understanding why he wasn't coming to get me. What about your last name? Jonathan asked. Do you remember what it was before you went into foster care? This was another frustrating blank spot in Maya's memory. I know my first name is Maya, but I'm not sure about my last name. The foster system gave me different last names depending on which family I was with. I've been Maya Rodriguez, Maya Thompson, Maya Johnson. I honestly don't know what my real last name is. Jonathan's phone buzzed with a text message. He read it quickly and his eyebrows went up. Dr. Petrov just arrived, he said. She's parking outside right now. Maya felt her stomach flip. She had never met anyone as important as a famous piano teacher before. What if Dr. Petrov listened to her play and decided she wasn't that good after all? What if tonight had just been a fluke? Don't be nervous, Jonathan said, noticing her expression. Dr. Petrov is one of the kindest people in the music world. She's not going to judge you or make you feel bad about anything. A few minutes later, Vincent Torres knocked on the office door. Maya, there's someone here who would like to meet you. Maya followed him out to the main dining room and immediately knew which person was Dr. Petrov. She was a woman in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun. She was wearing a long coat and carrying a leather bag that looked expensive but well used. But what struck Maya most was the woman's expression. Dr. Petrov was staring at her with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. Her eyes were wide, and she looked like she had just seen something impossible. My dear child, Dr. Petrov said in a voice with a slight accent that Maya couldn't identify. Would you mind playing something for me? I need to hear you in person. Maya nodded and walked back to the piano. She was getting used to people asking her to play, but something about Dr. Petrov's request felt different. More serious. What would you like me to play? Maya asked. Anything you want, Dr. Petrov said. Something that feels natural to you. Maya thought for a moment, then decided on Bach's Goldberg variations. She had always loved the complexity of Bach, the way each note seemed to fit perfectly with every other note like pieces of a puzzle. As she began to play, Maya noticed that Dr. Petrov moved closer to the piano. The older woman was studying not just Maya's playing, but the way she held her hands, the way she moved her body, even the way she breathed while she played. Maya played for about 10 minutes, working through several variations. When she finished, Dr. Petrov was standing so close that Maya could see tears in her eyes. "Where did you learn that fingering for the 15th variation?" Dr. Petrov asked quietly. Maya looked down at her hands. "I don't know. It just feels right to play it that way." Dr. Petrov sat down heavily in a nearby chair. She looked like someone had told her shocking news. "That fingering technique, it's very unusual. Most pianists play that variation completely differently, but there was one pianist who used that exact same fingering. He taught it to his students as his special interpretation." Jonathan had been listening carefully. "Who?" he asked. Dr. Petrov looked at Maya with an expression that was hard to read. "A pianist named David Chen. He was one of the most promising young musicians of his generation. He studied with me at Juilliard in the early 2000s. Maya felt something strange happening in her chest. "David Chen," she repeated slowly. The name sounded familiar, but she couldn't place where she had heard it before. "David was extraordinary," Dr. Petrov continued. "He had technique that most pianists could only dream of, but more than that, he had a musical soul. He could make people cry just by playing a simple scale." She paused and looked directly at Maya. "He also had a very distinctive way of interpreting certain pieces, phrasing choices that were uniquely his own. And tonight, when I listened to the recordings Jonathan sent me, I heard those same phrasing choices in your playing." Maya's heart was beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. "What happened to him?" Dr. Petrov's face became sad. "David died in a car accident about 15 years ago. He was driving to a concert when it happened. It was one of the greatest losses the classical music world has ever experienced." The room was completely silent. Maya could feel everyone staring at her, but she was too focused on Dr. Petrov's words to pay attention to anyone else. "Did he have a family?" Maya asked, though she was almost afraid to hear the answer. "Yes," Dr. Petrov said softly. "He had a daughter, a little girl who was maybe 7 or 8 years old when he died. I remember him talking about her all the time. He said she was already showing incredible musical talent." Maya felt like the world was spinning around her. "What was the daughter's name?" Dr. Petrov closed her eyes for a moment, trying to remember. I think her name was Maya." The silence that followed was so complete that Maya could hear cars driving by outside. Everyone in the restaurant was staring at her, waiting to see what she would say. But Maya couldn't say anything. She was remembering things. Suddenly, clearly, like someone had just turned on a bright light in a dark room. She remembered sitting at a grand piano with a man who had kind eyes and dark hair. She remembered him saying her name in a voice full of love and pride. She remembered him teaching her the special fingering for Bach's Goldberg variations. "My father's name was David," she whispered. Dr. Petrov leaned forward in her chair. "Maya, what else do you remember?" The memories were coming faster now. "He used to tell me that music was a language and that I was already fluent in it. He said I had a gift that was rare and special. He used to play duets with me, and he would always let me take the melody while he played the harmony." She looked up at Dr. Petrov with tears in her eyes. "He used to call me his little maestro. That was his nickname for me." Dr. Petrov was crying, now too. "Yes," she said. "David talked about his little maestro all the time. He was so proud of you. He used to say that you would be a better pianist than he ever was." Jonathan was frantically taking notes and recording everything on his phone. "This is incredible," he said. "Maya, do you realize what this means? You're not just talented. You're the daughter of one of the most gifted pianists of his generation. Maya felt overwhelmed by all the emotions flooding through her. Relief that she finally knew who her father was. Sadness that she had forgotten him for so long. Pride that he had been someone important and talented, but also fear. If her father had been famous, why hadn't anyone looked for her when she went into foster care? Why had she spent the last 11 years not knowing who she really was? What happened to me after he died? She asked Dr. Petrov. Why didn't anyone from the music world know that David Chen had a daughter in foster care? Dr. Petrov looked uncomfortable. I think there was some confusion after the accident. David wasn't married to your mother, and I don't think he had updated his legal documents to include information about you. When he died, you might have been placed in care before anyone from the music community even knew you existed. She paused. We all mourned David's death, but we were focused on the loss of his music. I'm ashamed to say that it didn't occur to any of us to look for his family. We assumed that if he had children, they would be taken care of by relatives. Maya woke up in a hotel room that was nicer than any place she had ever stayed in her life. The bed was huge and soft, with more pillows than one person could possibly need. Through the window, she could see the city waking up as the sun rose. Over the buildings, Dr. Petrov had insisted on getting her a room for the night, along with new clothes and anything else she needed. Maya had taken her first real shower in weeks, and now she was wearing clean jeans and a sweater that actually fit her properly. There was a knock on the door. Maya opened it to find Dr. Petrov standing in the hallway with a cup of coffee and a newspaper. Good morning, dear, Dr. Petrov said. I hope you slept well. We have a lot to do today. Maya let her in and saw that the newspaper was folded open to an article with a large headline. Lost piano prodigy found playing for food in restaurant. Below the headline was a picture of Maya sitting at the piano, taken by someone at the EU restaurant last night. I'm in the newspaper? Maya asked, staring at the photo. You're in several newspapers, Dr. Petrov said. And the story is all over the internet. Jonathan worked all night to get the word out about who you are. Maya read the first few lines of the article. It told the story of how David Chen's daughter had been found after 11 years, and how her incredible talent had been discovered when she played piano in exchange for a meal. This feels surreal, Maya said. Yesterday I was invisible. Now, I'm in the newspaper. Dr. Petrov sat down in the chair by the window. Maya, I need to tell you something important. When I got home last night, I spent several hours going through old photos and documents from when your father was my student. I found some things I think you should see. She pulled a manila folder from her bag and opened it on the small table. Inside were several photographs of a young man with dark hair and kind eyes. Maya recognized him immediately, even though the memories were still somewhat fuzzy. That's my father, she said quietly. Yes, it is. This photo was taken at his graduation recital from Juilliard. He was 26 years old. Dr. Petrov pulled out another photo, and this one was taken at a competition he won in Boston. Maya picked up the photos and studied them carefully. Seeing her father's face so clearly was bringing back more memories. She remembered the way he smiled when she played something correctly. She remembered how patient he was when she made mistakes. There's something else, Dr. Petrov said. She pulled out a piece of paper that looked old and yellowed. This is a program from the last concert your father ever gave. It was just 2 weeks before he died. Maya looked at the program. It was for a performance at Carnegie Hall, one of the most famous concert venues in the world. Her father's name was printed in elegant letters at the top. But what caught her attention was a small note written in pen at the bottom of the program. For Maya, my little maestro. Someday you'll play on this stage too. Dad. Maya felt tears filling her eyes. He wrote this for me? I found it in his dressing room after the concert, Dr. Petrov said. I kept it all these years because I thought it was sweet, but I never knew who Maya was. Now I know he was writing to you. Dr. Petrov's phone rang, interrupting the moment. She answered it and spoke for several minutes in a language Maya didn't recognize. When she hung up, she looked excited. That was a producer from the classical music channel, she said. They want to do a documentary about you and your father. They think your story could inspire young musicians all over the world. Before Maya could respond, there was another knock on the door. This time it was Jonathan Walsh carrying a stack of newspapers and looking like he hadn't slept all night. "Maya, you need to see this," he said, spreading the newspapers out on the bed. "Your story is everywhere." Maya looked at the headlines from different newspapers around the country. Musical miracle. Homeless girl revealed as piano legend's daughter. From the streets to Carnegie Hall, the Maya Chen story. The lost prodigy who played for food. "This is crazy," Maya said. "I just played piano in a restaurant. Why is everyone so interested?" Jonathan sat down on the edge of the bed. "Because stories like yours almost never happen. The idea that someone with your level of talent could be lost in the foster care system for 11 years, it's touching something in people's hearts." He pulled out his phone and showed her a video. "Look at this. Someone posted a video of you playing last night, and it already has 2 million views on social media." Maya watched herself on the small screen, playing Chopin in the restaurant. The comments below the video were overwhelming. Hundreds of people were sharing their own stories about foster care, about losing parents, about finding hope in music. "People are calling you an inspiration," Jonathan said. "You're showing the world that talent and beauty can be found in the most unexpected places." Dr. Petrov was looking through more papers in her folder. "Maya, I have something else to show you. I contacted some of your father's other friends from the music world, and they shared some things with me." She pulled out a small silver locket on a chain. "Your father always wore this. After he died, his friend kept it, hoping someday they might find you to give it to you." Maya took the locket and opened it. Inside was a tiny photo of herself as a small child, sitting at a piano with her father's arms around her. She was smiling and holding up a small trophy. "I remember this picture," Maya said suddenly. "I had just won my first piano competition. I was 6 years old, and I played a Mozart piece. My father was so proud that he took me out for ice cream. Afterward, the memories were coming back more clearly now. She remembered the taste of strawberry ice cream and the way her father had told everyone in the ice cream shop that his daughter was going to be a famous pianist someday." Dr. Petrov's phone rang again. This time she spoke for a long time, and Maya could tell from her expression that it was important news. "That was the admissions office at Juilliard," Dr. Petrov said when she hung up. "They want to fast-track your application. If you're interested, you could start classes next month." Maya felt overwhelmed again. Everything was happening so fast that she could barely keep up. "Next month? But I don't have any of the things I would need for school. I don't even have a place to live." "We'll take care of all of that," Dr. Petrov said. "The David Chen Memorial Foundation has already offered to cover your living expenses while you're in school." "The David Chen Memorial Foundation?" Maya asked. "It was started after your father died," Jonathan explained. "Musicians from around the world contributed money to create a foundation that would support young pianists who showed exceptional promise. It's only fitting that the first scholarship should go to David Chen's own daughter." Dr. Petrov stood up and walked to the window. "Maya, there's something else we need to discuss. Several concert halls have already called asking if you would be interested in performing. The offers are quite generous." Maya felt a flutter of panic in her stomach. "I don't know if I'm ready for that. Last night was different. I was just trying to get some food. The idea of performing in front of hundreds of people on purpose, that terrifies me." "That's completely understandable," Dr. Petrov said gently. "But you should know that your father felt the same way before his first major performance. Stage fright is normal, even for the most talented musicians." She pulled out another photo from her folder. This one showed David Chen standing on a stage in front of a large audience, holding flowers and taking a bow. This was taken after your father's debut at Carnegie Hall. He was 24 years old, and he told me later that he was so nervous before the performance that he almost didn't go on stage. Maya studied the photo. Her father looked confident and happy, but now that she knew he had been nervous, she could see something in his eyes that looked familiar. It was the same feeling she had right now. "What made him go through with it?" she asked. "He said he realized that his music could bring joy to people, and that was more important than his fear." Dr. Petrov said. He felt a responsibility to share his gift with the world. Jonathan was looking at his phone again. Maya, I just got a call from the president of Carnegie Hall. They want to offer you a performance date 6 months from now. It would be a tribute, concert to your father. Maya's heart started beating faster. Carnegie Hall. The same place where her father had performed. The same place he had dreamed she would perform someday. 6 months, she repeated. That would give me time to prepare? Plenty of time, Dr. Petrov said. And I would work with you, personally, to make sure you're ready. We could start with smaller performances and work your way up. Maya walked to the window and looked out at the city below. Somewhere out there were the foster homes where she had spent the last 11 years, the shelters where she had slept on cots with dozens of other people, the streets where she had been invisible and ignored. But she was also thinking about her father, about the dreams he had for her, about the note he had written on the concert program, saying that someday she would play on that stage too. I want to do it, she said finally. I want to perform at Carnegie Hall, not just for me but for my father. I want to show the world the music he taught me. Dr. Petrov smiled, and Maya could see tears in her eyes again. Your father would be so proud of you. He always said that music was meant to be shared, not hidden away. 6 months later, Maya stood in the wings at Carnegie Hall, wearing an elegant black dress that Dr. Petrov had helped her choose. Her hands were shaking slightly, but it was a different kind of nervousness than she had felt that night in the restaurant. This was the good kind of nervous, the kind that meant something important was about to happen. Through a gap in the curtains, she could see the audience filling the famous concert hall. There were over 2,000 seats, and every one of them was full. She recognized some faces in the crowd. Dr. Petrov was sitting in the front row, along with Jonathan Walsh and several other people who had become important in her life over the past few months. But what made her smile was seeing Vincent Torres sitting in the third row. The restaurant manager had become one of her biggest supporters, and he had insisted on buying a ticket to her debut performance. Next to him sat Linda Peterson, the gallery owner who had been the first person to offer Maya a paying performance. 5 minutes, Miss Chen, a stagehand said quietly. Maya nodded and took a deep breath. The past 6 months had been like living in a dream. She had started classes at Juilliard, where she was working with Dr. Petrov and other world-class teachers. She had a small apartment near the school, her own piano, and more sheet music than she could possibly learn in a year. But more than that, she had discovered who she really was. Not just Maya Chen, the homeless girl who played for food, but Maya Chen, daughter of David Chen, inheritor of a musical legacy that went back generations. Dr. Petrov had helped her research her family history, and they had discovered that her grandfather had also been a musician, and her great-grandfather before him. Music wasn't just something she was good at. It was literally in her blood. The memories of her father had continued to come back over the months. She remembered now that he had been working on a special composition when he died, a piece he was writing just for her. Dr. Petrov had found the unfinished sheet music among his belongings, and Maya had spent weeks learning to play it and completing the sections he had never finished. Tonight, she would perform that piece publicly for the first time. It felt like bringing her father's music back to life. Maya, a familiar voice said behind her. She turned to see a young man about her age walking toward her. His name was Alex Rivera, and he was also a piano student at Juilliard. Over the past few months, he had become one of her closest friends and biggest supporters. How are you feeling? Alex asked. Terrified and excited at the same time, Maya said honestly. I keep thinking about my father and wondering what he would think about tonight. Alex smiled. I think he would be incredibly proud. You've worked harder than anyone I know to get ready for this performance. Maya had indeed worked incredibly hard. In addition to her regular classes at Juilliard, she had been practicing 6 hours a day, preparing not just technically, but emotionally, for this moment. Dr. Petrov had taught her that performing wasn't just about playing the notes correctly. It was about telling a story and connecting with the audience. 2 minutes, Miss Chen, the stagehand announced. Maya walked to the edge of the stage and looked out at the piano sitting in the spotlight. It was a beautiful Steinway grand piano, the same type her father had preferred. She thought about the first time she had sat at a piano with him, how small her hands had looked on the keys. The audience was getting quieter now. Sensing that the performance was about to begin, Maya could see people checking their programs, which told the story of her journey from homeless teenager to Carnegie Hall performer. But this concert wasn't just about her story. Maya had insisted that part of the proceeds from ticket sales go to support foster children and homeless youth programs. She wanted to make sure that other kids in situations like hers would have better opportunities and wouldn't fall through the cracks the way she had. "Ladies and gentlemen," she heard the announcer say from the stage, "please welcome Maya Chen." This was it. Maya walked out onto the stage and the applause was immediate and overwhelming. The audience rose to their feet before she had even played a single note. Some people were already crying, moved by her story and what this moment represented. Maya sat down at the piano bench and adjusted it slightly. She looked out at the audience and felt a calmness wash over her. These people weren't here to judge her or make her feel small. They were here because they wanted to hear her music. She began with Chopin's Ballade No. 1, the same piece she had played that first night in the restaurant. But this time, she played it with 6 months of additional training and preparation. Every note was perfect, every emotion carefully crafted and delivered. As she played, Maya thought about her journey. She thought about the cold nights sleeping on the streets, the hunger, the loneliness, and the feeling that she was invisible to the world. But she also thought about the kindness of strangers, the power of music to bring people together, and the importance of never giving up hope. When she finished the Chopin, the applause was thunderous. But Maya wasn't done yet. She had prepared a full program for tonight, including several of her father's favorite pieces and the composition he had been working on when he died. "Before I play the next piece," Maya said into the microphone, "I want to tell you about my father." The audience fell silent, waiting to hear what she would say. "My father, David Chen, taught me that music is a language that everyone can understand, no matter where they come from or what their background is. He taught me that when we share our music with others, we're sharing a piece of our soul." Maya's voice was getting stronger and more confident as she spoke. "6 months ago, I was homeless and hungry, and I thought I was completely alone in the world. But music brought me back to my family, back to my history, and back to myself. Tonight, I want to share my father's music with you, including a piece he was writing for me when he died." She turned back to the piano and began to play her father's unfinished composition. It was a beautiful, complex piece that seemed to tell the story of a father's love for his daughter. Maya had worked with Dr. Petrov to complete the sections. Her father had never finished, trying to honor his musical style while adding her own voice to the piece. As she played, Maya felt like her father was there with her on the stage. She could almost feel his presence beside her, guiding her hands and encouraging her to play with all the emotion in her heart. The piece built to a dramatic climax that brought many people in the audience to tears. When Maya played the final notes, the silence that followed was so complete that she could hear her own heartbeat. Then the applause began, and it didn't stop for several minutes. The entire audience was on their feet, and Maya could see that many people were crying openly. Even some of the musicians in the orchestra pit were wiping their eyes. Maya stood up and took a bow, feeling overwhelmed by the response. This was what her father had dreamed of for her, sharing her music with the world and touching people's hearts. After the formal concert ended, there was a reception where Maya met dozens of people who wanted to congratulate her and share their own stories. She met other musicians who had known her father, classical music lovers who had been following her story, and several young people who said her journey had inspired them to pursue their own dreams. Vincent Torres approached her during the reception, looking proud and emotional. "I owe you an apology," he said. "That night in my restaurant, I judged you based on how you looked instead of who you were. I learned something important from you about not making assumptions about people." Maya smiled. "You gave me a chance. When I needed it most," she said. "That's what matters." Linda Peterson was there too, along with Jonathan Walsh and Dr. Petrov. They had all become like family to Maya over the past 6 months. So what's next? Jonathan asked. I've heard there are already offers for you to perform in London and Paris. Maya looked around at the group of people who had supported her journey. I want to keep studying and improving as a musician, she said, but I also want to make sure that other kids who are going through what I went through have better opportunities. She had already started working with several organizations that supported foster children and homeless youth. Maya wanted to use her platform to bring attention to these issues and to make sure that talented kids didn't get lost in the system the way she had. I'm also thinking about starting a scholarship program, Maya continued. Something that would help kids from difficult backgrounds get music lessons and instruments, even if they can't afford them. Dr. Petrov put her arm around Maya's shoulders. Your father would be so proud of the young woman you've become, she said. He always said that the best musicians use their gifts to make the world a better place. As the reception wound down and people began to leave, Maya found herself alone on the stage for a few minutes. She sat back down at the piano and played quietly, just for herself. She thought about the girl who had walked into that restaurant 6 months ago, desperate and hungry, and feeling like nobody cared if she existed. That girl could never have imagined that she would end up here, on one of the most famous stages in the world with a future full of possibilities. But she also thought about all the kids who were still out there, sleeping in shelters or on the streets, feeling invisible and forgotten. Maya knew she had been incredibly lucky.